Okay, so we're out for a bit of a walk here and we've just found stinkhorns. And I've been told that stinkhorn eggs, this is the immature phase of the stinkhorn Phallus impudicus, is edible, or at least part of it is. So we're going to have a look at that today. So, when we cut this in half, what we've got here is quite interesting to look at. So this is the immature stinkhorn here, which hasn't grown up yet, and this is the stinky bit here. But it's this jelly around the edge here is supposedly edible, and so I'm going to try a bit today. So there it is. Okay, can't say I can recommend that really. It's just like jelly with absolutely no flavour. But there you go. So that's a stinkhorn egg. And yeah, supposedly, well, definitely edible, but I can't say I'm going to recommend it. I stopped recording after that, but for the rest of that walk, until I could return home and wash, my mouth, especially my lips, were coated in a weird film of slime that just wouldn't wipe off, and it was like I'd got soap in my mouth. So I certainly don't see any reason at all to recommend trying stinkhorn egg jelly. It just tastes of slimy nothing. We did pick some rather lovely oyster mushrooms, which will appear on a separate video tomorrow, but I didn't record much more on that walk as the weather started to close in. At this time of year in England, it's very common to be able to look in one direction and see bright sunshine and blue skies, but to turn around and see a really angry looking sky full of rain and thunder behind you. And that's what happened on this trip. Although it was worth being out in it, because there was one moment standing in a cathedral of beech trees where the rain crashed down even though the sun still shone through. Let me show you that moment. Anyway, channel news. I was interviewed briefly on BBC Radio 4 recently about my scam baiting, and in that interview it slipped out that I'd quit my day job to work full-time on Atomic Shrimp. So let me tell you about that. So it's true, after a great deal of very careful thought and planning, I quit my job in IT management at the end of August this year in order to devote more of my time and attention to making content for this channel, which over the last 2 or 3 years has already grown to become a second full-time job. Some people have already described this as my retirement, but in reality it's just me going from 2 full-time jobs down to 1. I refrained from announcing this earlier for a couple of reasons. Firstly, from where you're sitting, nothing should really be changing. I'm just going to carry on making videos on topics that catch my interest, like scams and weird cans, but also new topics and ideas as they come along. But also, I wanted to handle this change without any fuss or noise. Stepping away from a career that you've built up over decades is no small undertaking, and I expect there'll be a number of questions and concerns and probably suggestions. I didn't really want to have to handle all of those at the same time as the actual transition. So as well as thanking you all warmly for your kind support over the years, there's one thing I have to ask, as politely as I can, is that if you're about to write a comment that begins with the words "you should," please remember there's still only one of me. Now, I'm not saying don't write that comment. Ideas are at the heart of everything I do. So your suggestions are always welcome, even if I don't have time to pursue them all. A few answers to commonly asked questions that might crop up even more commonly now. So Patreon. I don't currently have a Patreon or anything like that. I'm not averse to the idea in principle, but I just don't perceive a pressing need for it right now. Can I send you stuff? I don't have a PO box to receive weird stuff in a can, and I just couldn't find a solution that's both affordable and reliable. And I'm not really sure that I could cope with the influx anyway. Can we hang out and chat? I don't have any plans to open up a Discord server. I do love you guys, and I love reading all of your comments, and I interact as much as I can. But I think if you consider this carefully, I think what you really want is for me to focus my efforts and energies on continuing to make the content for this channel. So what does this mean for the future of Atomic Shrimp? Well, one big plus is that I should be able to commit to a regular upload schedule, which you might have already noticed. Generally, there'll be at least one video per week, Friday afternoon UK time, often a second video on Saturday, and occasionally a third video on Sunday. The topics are going to be as random and assorted as ever, but I will try to rotate them so that we don't get stuck in a rut. In summary, I've enjoyed both of the jobs I've done over past years, but the content on this channel is where my heart really takes me. So thank you for helping it to grow to this point, and I hope you'll stay with me for the adventure still to come. For my lunch today, I've got leftovers. I've got some leftover mashed potato here with various other vegetables, and so we've got mashed potato, carrots, peas and broccoli. I'm just going to mash those up a little bit in the bowl. We're going to make something a bit like bubble and squeak today. Okay, I think this needs a little bit of flavour. So normally I might fry up a fresh onion and mix that in, but I've got some crisp, ready cooked onions here. So we'll just have a bit of that in there. And I think it needs just something else, and that something else today is going to be a bit of red chilli. So just going to and we'll have that in there as well. And we'll just mix that through with 1 egg. Whoops. Just to bind it a little bit, we've put that egg in there. And that's starting to come together now. So ideally I'd have liked to fry this in a little bit of bacon fat or something. But we don't have that today, so a bit of oil. Bit of black pepper, a bit of salt, okay, now I'm going to turn the heat right down and just fry that gently. Let's see how that's doing. I'm not going to be brave enough to try and flip this in one piece, but if we divide it up into quarters, now we might be more or less lucky. We'll give it another couple of minutes on the other side. Okay, I think that's probably there now. Let's just flip one piece over again, just to check it is done on the underside. Yep, that looks good to me. Yeah, so that's browning up very nicely on the underside now. Let's serve it up. So the lighting conditions here are giving me some serious challenge here. I've got direct sunlight coming through the window, sort of autumn low sunlight. So, apologise if the levels are all over the place here, but that's just the way it goes. So there we go, kind of bubble and squeak. Now, if I put ketchup with this, the brown sauce brigade are going to come out and say, ooh, not ketchup. And if I put brown sauce on here, I'm going to get the same thing from the ketchup brigade. So, to confound both of you, I'm going to use some of my own blackberry ketchup from last year. Spicy bubble and squeak with blackberry ketchup. Let's give it a taste. Do you know what? That's really good. And this blackberry ketchup is just fantastic now that it's matured. Still really fruity, but uniquely halfway between ketchup and brown sauce. I think it could have stood a bit more chilli in there. And certainly it won't harm having a bit more black pepper. But that's really good. Out for a little walk in a new bit of woodland we've never visited before, and spotted a parasol mushroom. And now I've said in a previous video that I tried these once and didn't like them. Perhaps it's time to give it another chance. Now this is definitely parasol mushroom. It's got these scales on top here. It's got that snakeskin look on the stem. So we're going to take this today and see if we can have it for lunch, see if we can make something nice out of it. Right, so a little bit more scouting around, and we found a very sad looking specimen right there. And possibly the biggest one I've ever seen. Right here. So again, this is parasol fungus, parasol mushroom. Look at the size of that thing. I think this one's still sound enough to take. So I think we will have that one. I might have to cut it in half when I put it in the basket. I'm going to use a recipe from Roger Phillips' Wild Food book. We're going to make a batter. We're going to cut the caps into quarters or thirds, dip them in the batter and then deep fry them. So I'm using the two smallest mushrooms I picked today. Yes, that really is one of the smallest ones. The two larger ones I will chop up and put in the dehydrator, I think. So the batter. The batter's going to be made of 50 grams of plain flour. And in this dish here I've got ground black pepper, mixed herbs, which is parsley, sage, rosemary and thyme, and a pinch of salt. About a tablespoon of butter, which we'll melt. So we're just going to mix those dry ingredients together first. And we've got 1 egg. So the egg and the butter in, and then 150 ml of milk added a little bit at a time just to help it blend. It really doesn't matter if this batter has some lumps in it. Okay, that's good. Quite a thin batter this, so that's quite interesting. So I'm going to leave the batter to stand for about 15 minutes just to let the starch grains expand and thicken the batter a little bit. So this particular species of mushroom is actually very delicate. It has very little flesh on the cap, in fact. So for anybody, one of those people who keep on telling me that I should be washing mushrooms, well, that would be quite impossible here, because for one thing this cap is covered in these scales, and the other thing is it's such a light and insubstantial mushroom that washing it would just destroy it. So the stalk is too woody and fibrous to actually eat, so I suppose we could put that in a stock pot if we were making a casserole or something. That'd be quite nice, bit of mushroom flavour. But that'll just go on my compost for today. So this is the mushroom. Let's have a sniff. So yeah, it just smells really mild and foresty. Just going to make sure that there's no foreign bodies in amongst the gills. Okay, so that's those pieces. And I can't emphasize how light and nothingy this mushroom really is. It's lighter even than the puffball. And here's one of the other things we see about this mushroom. This is one of the sort of diagnostic characteristics of this mushroom, is that this ring that you get on the stem, which is the remnants of a veil that attached the cap when it was in the smaller stage, is very often separate and actually just moves on its own. I didn't separate that from the stem, that was already detached. Good, I think we're probably more or less ready to start now. Okay, well here's another use for this woody stem. I can use that to test whether the oil is hot enough yet, and it's not. Okay, that's now bubbling immediately when I put it into the oil, so I think that's up to temperature. So we dump in a piece of the mushroom into the batter. To save getting my fingers in a big mess, I'm going to use tongs. I'll give that a dunk in the batter so it's fully immersed. Okay, and then drain for a moment and into the oil. Well, what's interesting here is that looks for all the world like pieces of fried fish. So, I'm going to thicken the batter with a bit more flour and we'll try again. Now while that second batch is cooking, I'm going to try a piece of the first batch. Now it's gone quite floppy and soggy. It's a little bit crispy on the outer skin, but yeah, it's absorbed a lot of oil. Let's have a little bite. That tastes good. Okay, that's looking a bit more hopeful on this batch. I think that batter was just too thin, so I think you probably want about maybe even 100 grams of flour in that batter recipe. Okay, I'm going to assume that that's about as done as it gets. It does look pretty good this time round. So out onto the paper to drain. I've got one more piece to fry and then we'll serve up. Okay, so that's what we've ended up with. Kind of mushroom fritters. They do look a little bit like breaded fish. Just going to give one of them a little taste now. Now I'm going to serve this with salad and bread and things like that, but let's have a taste of them as they are. So inside you can see it's very moist inside. Very juicy. Still needs a little bit more salt and a bit of pepper. That's interesting, because for me that would be a fairly decent substitute for a piece of fried plaice or something like that, or other fried fish. Yeah, it's all right. Not bad. So yeah, I think I'll pick that again actually. Now it's interesting because parasol mushrooms, I didn't think I liked them because I tried them once before a long time ago, and they had a really odd flavour to me, but perhaps that's the way they were prepared. Yeah, it was all right. So continuing the thought process that these are a bit like fried fish, I'm going to put a couple of them in a sandwich. A bit of vinegar on them. A bit of salt and black pepper. Always black pepper. Now I don't have any tartar sauce, but I do have, I'll just have a little bit of mayonnaise, a little bit of ketchup, and a few capers. So treating this very much as if it was a fillet of fish. So we'll have a few shreds of lettuce as well. Fake fish sandwich. So that's what it looks like. Let's see what it tastes like. Yeah, that works. So, yeah, I mean, it's not your choice mushroom, but it's all right.
Yeah.
So while I was up at Steve and Julia's orchard the other day, I noticed some mustard plants. Now, this is a wildflower, this is a wild plant, growing as a weed in their vegetable patch, but it is a wild mustard. So I noticed that the pods are in that perfect state where the seeds haven't quite developed inside them, and they're not fibrous at all. They've still got quite a snap to them. And I tasted one. It just tastes of kind of radish. It has a little bit of mustard-like heat that grows over time. So as you chew it, it gets a little bit hotter, but in a nice and very pleasant way. So I picked a bunch of these pods, and today we're going to try pickling them. I made sure when I picked them that I removed all the stalks, so they're already prepared. Here I've got some salt. I've got about half a teaspoon of salt and some spices. So I've got peppercorns, cloves, coriander, fennel, mustard seeds and caraway seeds in here. So we're going to use about half a cup of vinegar. That's about 110 ml. And we're going to top that off with water. We're just going to dump into a pan along with the spices and salt. And then we're going to bring this to a simmer to allow those spices to infuse into the vinegar. So that's boiling nicely now. We're going to go in with our mustard pods, all of them, which will temporarily take it off the boil. I'm just going to make sure that those are all immersed in the hot liquid. And then a timer for 3 minutes. Lid back on, I think. Right, so time's up. We'll turn that off. Now they have turned a rather less appetizing shade of khaki green. I'm just going to taste one of those now, just to make sure they haven't gone tough or anything like that. No, those are nice and tender. So that's good. So over here, I'm just going to fish those out and drain them. So I'm now going to pack these pods down into a clean jar. And just for now, we're going to put the lid on. So now I'm going to allow this vinegar brine to cool down properly. And when it's completely cold, we'll pour it over the pickles in the jar. That can just go in the fridge for now. And we're just going to top that off with that cold mixture all the way up to the top. So we just got to make sure everything's immersed in the vinegar, which it is. Lid on, so it will not cook any further because that's cold vinegar now, but the vinegar will seep into that and pickle those pods a bit more. Okay, well it's time to test out my pickled mustard pods, which I made about 3 days ago. And to that end I've got a bit of buttered bread, a lovely apple, and some of this cheese. This is a cheese called Solstice from Somerset. Never tried this one before, so this will be interesting. Looks good. Smells amazing. So, just going to try a bit of this cheese on its own first, actually. Yeah, that's good. So the all-important taste test of pickled mustard. Well, it smells like a proper pickle, as it should. It's full of vinegar. So, we'll try one on its own first. That's good. Not as complex in flavour as, say, capers, but a little bit more so than gherkins. So that's good. Nice and crisp, and tastes like a pickle should. Yeah, that absolutely works for me. I'm a little bit surprised that there is no mustard heat there. I thought we might get a little bit of peppery mustard heat there from the mustard pods, but that seems to have subsided a little bit during the pickling. But that's a very fine pickle. So yeah, that is a success as far as I'm concerned. These are a bit fiddly to pick, but actually worth the effort, I would say. So that's pickled mustard pods on atomic shrimp. Thanks for watching, and I hope to see you again soon.